You have arrived at Planet Who Doesn't Have a Podcast.
Welcome back to Who Doesn't Have a Podcast. There's not really much Doctor Who news, and there probably won't be much Doctor Who news for a very long time. But I wanted to jump on this call with you, Dan, because, well, actually, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Michael, one of the co-hosts of Who Doesn't Have a Podcast, but you guys know that. You watch every week. I'm here with my faithful co-host, Daniel Allen.
Hello, hello.
We talk about Doctor Who, as often as we can. When the show is actually running, we were talking about it every week, and now we just sort of get together when we want to discuss things that have come up in the news, of which there will probably be little. I think there'll be little news for the time being. Something that has just happened. This isn't what I wanted to talk about, but I think we'll talk about it now. So Mark Gatiss has been quoted today saying about Doctor Who that all good things come to an end, and that he thinks that the show's return quietly won't happen. He goes on to say, I think the BBC putting it out to tender is a perfectly great idea, but we've been here before. When it was cancelled in 1989, the BBC made a big statement saying, we're committed to taking Doctor Who through to the 90s. They put it out to tender then, and then it just quietly didn't happen. And he's got a feeling maybe that's what's going to happen this time, which I wouldn't be surprised if that does happen, because this whole thing about putting it out to tender and different production companies bidding for it, I mean, that could take a very long time.
I think this is something that maybe should have happened 10 years ago. I feel like it kind of outstayed its welcome a little bit now. As much as we love the show, we've gone in great depth about how badly wrong it's gone. It needs a break. It needs a break. And I think the finale, I think the fallout from RTD, I think just the general mess that's been left in its wake now is just enough for... I think all fans feel the same way now, where they love the show enough to kind of call it a day just for a little bit. Whether it comes back with a new production company or a bit of time to have passed, I think it just feels exhausting now. It feels like the horse has been flogged and it is now just a dead carcass on the floor. And it's just now time to adopt a calf and start again.
When they announced the tender process, I would say that it was, I think the idea, because they cancelled the Christmas special, I think everyone thought that it might be something that could happen quite quickly. I think it's become clear that this is not going to be a quick process. And I think, like Mark Gatiss has said, it could be that it just quietly goes away for 20 years. I don't know what we'll do on this podcast, but we could, I think we're in for a long stint without Doctor Who, which I know you very much argued would probably benefit the show. We were talking on the WhatsApp chat this morning. It is remarkable. I've been on record as saying I've enjoyed quite a lot of the past few years, but it's remarkable that we went from the people who brought it back in 2005, the most successful era of the show ever, and then that same production team came back for a second go, and it's arguably probably the worst era of the show we've had, especially in modern times. And Jerome would argue that would be Chibnall's era, but I think this is going to age worse.
I think the bizarre thing as well is that the 60th specials were absolutely spectacular. And we were lulled into this false sense of hope that the show was going to be like a proper renaissance of, the mid-noughties and everything we loved, and the character development and the amazing monsters and the story arcs. And it was just going to be like our childhood reborn. And I think we all fell into that trap. But the problem is with nostalgia, it plays better through the rose-tinted spectacles in your mind than it does in reality. It's like I always maintain there's games that I played as a kid, like on my original PlayStation. I'll be going, that game was class. It was the best thing that's ever been made. And odds are I'll go back and play it and it's absolute dog shit. There's no good redeeming feature about it. The quality's awful. The gameplay's jagged. And so you just kind of fall into that nostalgia trip of how cool was who. It was Saturday nights, big monsters, Tennant, Eccleston, Billy Piper, everybody else. And it can't be done again. And I think the problem is now, and you see it not just in Doctor Who, but also in Marvel and other shows as well, they're really trying to hammer down the nostalgia trip just to keep that IP alive. And I think sometimes there's no shame in calling it a day. You know, the times change. You've still got those wonderful memories, but I think it's a good point to know when to stop. And I only say this as well.
Me that you think Avengers Doomsday is just going to be a rehash of everything that's come before?
I've got horrible. I mean, the fact that they are, and this could be another podcast within itself, but the fact that they are re-releasing Endgame with like extra material to bridge the gap between that. So what the hell was the last 7 years? What was that all about? Like, we've got all this extra stuff to go. Oh, by the way, the multiverse, it never happened.
The last 7 years, is a joke, Marvel-wise, has been a complete joke. It's what they did in Deadpool, right? Where they're like, I was talking about Marvel in our Doctor Who podcast, but what he said in Deadpool about how have you seen Deadpool? Deadpool and Wolverine.
Of course.
Yeah. When he's like, the multiverse hasn't worked. Like, let's call it a day. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. I've got interestingly though, I do have high hopes for it, because the Russo brothers have not let us down with Marvel projects before. I think it's a big swing bringing Robert Downey Jr. back.
But that's if Robert Downey Jr. is Victor Von Doom. Have you seen all the theories with this is going to be complete? We're going to go back on Who in just a moment. Not that there's anything to talk about. But there was something at D23 where they unveiled Victor Von Doom's outfit or, uniform. And the eye holes or something else in some of the teaser footage was different to what we've seen Robert Downey Jr. in. So there's some talk that they think Marvel's leading us down this path and it's actually going to be somebody else, which would be phenomenal. But in terms of that whole nostalgia thing, I think, again, like I had another example in my head, it's gone, unfortunately, but you look back at TV and tours and stuff like that, and then take that, I've just redone the circus tour. And unanimously, a lot of people went, this is why we shouldn't do nostalgia tours, because it's just not as good.
I almost bought
no offense to them, by the way.
Mum tickets for that, so maybe I'm quite glad that I didn't do that. Is it not as good? I don't know.
I've seen clips. Mark Owen isn't quite as flexible as he once was. Let's say that. But I think going back to Who, though, I think it was inevitable. I think there was the false dawn of it being taken up by a massive streamer. We all have those conversations. We all remember what Jerome said about really loving the start of Space Babies and said it was very... What was the thing he said? What was the comparison he made?
He said that it's very Partners in Crime-esque. Moron.
It just isn't. It just wasn't. And the thing is, I was the only one of us three to kind of go, not sure where this is going to go.
Yeah, I got in the tank behind Space Babies as well. I was like, this is, and now I think it's sort of unanimously recognised when you look back. It's like, why did they do that? Why did they lead with that?
And it's such a shame as well, because it had the makings of being something truly fantastic. But I think the creators in charge, they just took it down the route of social media, the moments. We've got to create moments. I'm like, no, you just got to create a 45-minute television program that has an A, B, and C. And what you did is you had A, Q, P, back to B again, then X, then the negative sign, then a question mark, and then an at symbol. This
leads me on quite nicely to what I wanted to talk about, which is, as part, the first rumbling of anything happening in this tender process was this was a story that ran a couple of weeks ago by the Times. There's a company called Electric Entertainment who were apparently in talks with the BBC to take over Doctor Who. They're like a Hollywood production company. But what they wanted when they rebooted Doctor Who was they'd approached David Tennant to come back again, right?
Oh, God.
Which so apparently, this is all apparently. And what it does is it's sort of... So there's two elements to this, I think. One, it's almost like what somebody who has never seen the show would do, which is he is the most I think, iconic Doctor. He's got the most, his whole aesthetic as the Doctor is probably the most iconic iconography outside of Tom Baker. So it's someone who would go, well, it was really successful when David Tennant was in it. They bring him back. Okay, right? Now, as fans of the show, who are sort of, who know the lore and have followed the history of it, for as long as certainly for as long as the revival since 2005, we know that they've dipped their hands into that well now, a couple of times, even bringing him back for 3 whole specials where he was basically the Doctor again, full time. So the fan outcry would be, I mean, this is actually insane, but maybe for the casual viewer who really, really doesn't care about Doctor Who too much.
Me.
Is that you?
That's me.
You host a Doctor Who podcast.
No, but what I mean is, I didn't see a lot of Jodie Whittaker's era, but I watched the finale because there were rumblings about it, there being a regeneration, and, there was rumours about obviously David Tennant coming back. Wasn't expecting in a million years for him to show up at the end of that and it'd just be the mother of all cliffhangers, and he kind of regenerated back into his suit, and he looked
You didn't know that David Tennant was coming back up to that point? Had you not seen the... Seriously? So,
I think I'd heard the rumblings of it, but I didn't think in a million years that, one, they were going to show regeneration, and 2, it was going to be my Doctor.
Yeah.
So it was a proper whoa.
Well,
and that was
I
nostalgia.
envy the people who, because they'd released photos of them filming the 60th anniversaries in Bristol, and they'd announced that Catherine Tate and David Tennant were coming back before the regeneration.
Yeah.
But I actually envy the people that didn't know anything, don't follow, they just wouldn't have come across that news. So can you imagine people just watching that, just tuning into BBC One on a Saturday night, and it was Jodie Whittaker's regeneration, and they regenerated back into David Tennant? I think that would have worked for so many people.
100%. 100%. But yes, that's a really good point about, because I think David Tennant was easily one of the most charismatic Doctors of the revival. He is in pop culture. He voiced himself in an episode of Family Guy, for God's sake, in a cutaway gag. He is universally etched into Doctor Who, probably more so than the other Doctors, or at least on an international scale. I mean, I was convinced there was a reason why his Doctor, or spin-off Doctor, remained alive in the universe, because we all joked about their emergency glass, David Tennant pulling back. Would it surprise me happen again? Probably not. I think he's a fantastic Doctor. I just think it's annoying because all the Doctors that followed on, it's kind of wrecking their legacy, because you're just circling. It's like you're hitting the roundabout and just coming back to Tennant again. It's almost
like every new Doctor throughout their entire tenure is like an audition process to be as recognisable and sort of well known in the role as David Tennant's Doctor. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I think that was the problem. I think because you when they cast such an incredible actor as David Tennant in that role, the bar was set so high. So people like Matt Smith onwards, it's such a difficult act to follow. And Matt absolutely smashed it, of course he did. But there's always going to be that public amount, sort of like bond between him and who. And, the 60th more than proved that, both in viewing figures and the social media buzz of all that when that blew up. And in all these rumblings as well with another production company coming in. I mean, could you see Tennant coming back like as his sort of Doctor with Donna, and it kind of being like a one-off Who movie again?
Do you know, I think my question is I was saying this to Jerome earlier, if a production company, I don't know if there's any truth in what the Times has reported here, but if Electric Entertainment were serious about carrying Doctor Who, and one of their conditions was, we want David Tennant back as the Doctor, my argument is, from a fan perspective, that is a complete eye roll. It's exactly what you said. You're hitting that Tennant emergency button. They've already done it a couple of times. There's no need to do it again. But that's for people that are really ingrained in the history of the show. I think the casual viewer doesn't care. I think that is shown by the fact that Disney didn't renew their partnership with Doctor Who. Like, it's just not a cultural phenomenon anymore. If a Hollywood production company took over the production of Doctor Who, and David Tennant came back as the Doctor, and the stories were good, and the story arcs were good, would it still work? Because that's why I think 2005 was so interesting. The 2005 revival it was kind of like a soap, really. I mean, it was a love story between the Doctor and a companion set in the iconography of this show that ran from the 60s onwards. So it has this really iconic iconography, but they told a very simple, basic story. So fans, if David Tennant came back in a newly revived Doctor Who again, would be like, this is insane. But the general public would, if the stories were good and the show were good, it could still be a success, right? Right?
And I think maybe deep down they've sort of realised that as well, because there's no other Doctor that has been introduced or reintroduced and then sort of been left to. Do you know what I mean? Like he's still in existence. He's still there. Do you know what I mean? And no other Doctor
clearly for planned spin-offs that now are never going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that's another dying shame as well, because I think it had the makings of a fun spin-off, and like, could other Doctors have their own spin-offs as well? Because I know, forgive me, I've forgotten the actor's name, but they brought him back for
Paul McGann.
Paul McGann, yes, and didn't they bring him back for like a mini episode before the 50th?
They did. Yeah, it was where that really famous line comes from, which is, "I'm a Doctor, but maybe not the one you were expecting," because the audience didn't expect him to show up, and it was this mini-sode where, yeah, very good.
Yeah, and I think it's a shame that you're probably not going to see that. You're probably not going to see, but I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head when you talked about it coming back and it was more like a soap opera. Was that it was a different genre, it was a different take on Who. Like, you know, like the original run was very, very sci-fi, very, very geeky. This one was kind of more contemporary, and it sort of meshed itself well with a contemporary audience. And I think it's kind of been lost along the way, where they've tried to blend the casual viewer with the diehard fan, and you're never going to please the two. So I think maybe a break from it, and it maybe comes back in a slightly different guise, and maybe something that hits the next generation better than it did, or the equivalent of how it hit our generation, will only be a good thing. But I think it's one of those programs in the same way that, you know, like, I suppose like Top Gear, for example, it became a behemoth. It kind of ran out of steam. They tried to like bring it back to the glory days, didn't work. And so they kind of just rested it. And I think the show just needs a big, deep breath. And I think maybe the 60th, and at least the start, I mean, even after the first series, it maybe could have done with a bit of a breath then. And it's a shame, because you have clearly capable actors. There were episodes, like we said, throughout the run where they excelled. But I think once again, it was a mix of nostalgia hit, writing for a modern audience, which never goes down well, and an over-expectation that couldn't be delivered. And then you factor that in as well.
They just need to tell solid stories, don't they, with solid story arcs. And I'm talking basic. Yeah. I'm talking basic, because the through line, like I said, the through line from the 2005 revival was like, it was a love story. It's the most basic thing in the, you know, the most universal thing set within the universe of Doctor Who. Like, no wonder it was a success.
And I think that's the kind of Marvel thing as well. I know we touched upon it before, but I think the minute the Marvel multiverse became a thing, that bled into other sci-fi shows, and Doctor Who was one of the sort of wounded victims of that, where you would ultimately have these incredibly complex narratives and storylines, or you'd alter the entire past of a character, or it turned out that all of that happened didn't mean anything. And then think, the minute you start to tweak a very sacred timeline, stuff like character like mortality and stakes just sort of vanish. You know, in like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, just that, if they can turn around and go, well, there's another version of Spider-Man and he's still alive, and it's like, well, if the character dies, they're not really dead, are they? And it's the same with Doctor Who, where it's like, it's just an easy cop-out where you can go, oh, right, it's gone a bit shit, let's bring back David Tennant. That's not how it works. You have like one-time Doctor and that's it.
Like we discussed on the last podcast, the concept of bi-generation is probably the worst for dramatic stakes storytelling thing that they could ever do, because it literally just robs anything of any jeopardy ever, because you just know that the character's going to die and then literally split in two and live on. I have to start wrapping it up soon, but I want to end on this. I think we need to do a proper podcast on a deep dive on what's happened in the past few years, because I know we did quite a lot of it last time, but there is so many interesting details to discuss. I think Russell T Davies has a book coming out soon which should touch on a bit of it, by the way. So I think we should read that and then maybe get back together to talk about it. But I want to concentrate on a very specific quote that. So when Russell T Davies was brought back, before we'd seen any footage, as the Jodie Whittaker era was wrapping up, Stephen Moffat did an interview, and he said that for people that think they know what to expect, you don't, or something, or it's going to be very different. And then actually what we got was probably the most nostalgia heavy stories we could get, really. I mean, we were obviously from the off. I'll give it a pass because it was an anniversary, but they brought back David Tennant and Catherine Tate, okay? And then in the third episode, The Giggle, they did try and point towards the future, but that was obviously very nostalgia heavy. Like I say, it's an anniversary, we'll let it go. But then villains like Sutek and Omega and the Rani, and I think there was, I don't know if you remember this, but I think it's the finale of series 1. I'm pretty sure, for reasons that I cannot remember why, from a storytelling perspective, in the TARDIS, the Doctor and Ruby sit down and re-watch an episode of the classic series of Doctor Who, like as if there was a camera there or something that explains the origins of Sutek. And I think there's scenes of this episode of them just watching Tom Baker and whoever the companion was just like talking, and it's just old footage. It was the most nostalgia heavy. Even the sequel to Midnight, which I really, really enjoyed, is very much looking back into the past. So I don't really understand where that Stephen Moffat quote came from, where he's like, if you think you know what to expect, you don't. I actually thought we got I don't know what we got. It was just nostalgia, wasn't it? It was just...
Yeah. Or it was Moffat going, if you think you know what to expect, you don't, because he took one look at it and gone, this is just a complete clusterfuck. Even Legacy fans are going to go, I'm lost.
So you're saying that he double guessed himself. He was like, if you think that you're expecting nostalgia, don't. Is that what you're saying? And then he was like, oh, that's what they've done.
If you think you know Doctor Who, you're going to get singing gremlins, space babies, and a character made out of snot, and a Beatles episode where the Beatles don't actually sing a Beatles song.
But that was the Beatles episode. I think that is a good example of it being quite different, because it was, the musical. I'm not sure how much of it worked, but it was the show trying to be quite different. And then I just can't help but feel that it became quite almost like in conversation with itself, in a really bizarre way for a show that was trying to look forward. And then obviously it culminated in one of the most nostalgia heavy things it can do, which is have the Doctor regenerate into an old companion.
Yeah.
Why did they do that?
I get, because what was weird as well, and obviously we will obviously wrap this up and go into more details about it soon, but the social media stuff of Who was ramping up the 20th anniversary stuff. They put the original logo on the social media. They're putting up all these clips from those, that anniversary saga with Tennant, Billy Piper. It was really ramping itself up to some kind of major celebration. And I don't know any other era of Who that they've celebrated that hard in recent memory. You don't get like a 5 or 10 year anniversary of Matt Smith, do you? Not to the level of this. So I think they were really gunning for a spin-off with Tennant, or at least Billy Piper, the two of them come back for God knows what reason, to really be a thing. But then somewhere along the line, the relationships collapsed, and we've ended up in this situation where Russell Davies has gone, work that out. And then it's just been like, what the fuck has just happened? And he's just kind of left this ethereal world where the Doctor's now become Billy Piper for some reason. and now we'll never get an answer. And odds are we will probably never get an answer to this. It's just going to be left to kind of go, well, what does that mean? Because don't get me wrong, when we had that gap between the Doctor Who movie and the 2005 one, it was a roller coaster ride of a film, but at least the ending of the Doctor getting into his TARDIS and flying off was like, all right, okay, we might see him again sometime. How do you jump from Billy Piper floating in the outer ethereal space to whatever's coming next? Surely that's got to have an answer.
And that is just to completely ignore it. And that's what I mean about kind of like that's kind of what I mean about if this production company does want to take on Doctor Who and they do want to cast David Tennant as the Doctor, one, he'd have to say yes, which I just don't think he'd do because it's so weird. But if he did, and if it was right and the story was right, I think what they just have to do is just ignore everything. Just from the get-go, just whatever episode 1 is, just start telling a decent story, which also sets up whatever the series is going to be. Don't get bogged down in. I think you can just what did it really well. Actually, the 2005 revival of Doctor Who did it really well because it created this element of a time war, which was a mystery for new viewers and old viewers. So that kind of like soft relaunched the show, I thought, really, really well. There is another example in recent memory of a show coming back, not really acknowledging anything of its past, but not ignoring it, and it just did it really well, and it's completely blanked me. Cannot remember what it is. But it's just because they were telling a decent story and no one really cared. So you could do that. So my argument is, whilst I don't want it to happen as a fan who loves Doctor Who, if they did bring it back with David Tennant as the character, I think it's fine and it works as long as they just tell a decent story. I think that's all the show needs right now. It just needs
just strip away the nonsense. Just bring it back to basics. That's all we want, and that's why it works in the first place, because you made it so straightforward, and you added complexity with it. It was like the Marvel thing, where you focus on one thing and you slowly build up the universe with spin-off series and other characters, and it kind of crescendos to that one episode where you've got all the Doctor's companions, or when the Doctor says goodbye and regenerates in the first place. It's more impactful because you've had the time to grow with those characters.
Exactly.
And with those stories. And you kind of got like a Marvel thing again, but it's a bit like a Marvel thing where it becomes this behemoth. And then it's like, well, here's a spin-off series, here's another film, here's a Disney Plus thing, here's a cartoon. And then like a very short time later, you're meant to sort of sit there and go, okay, I'm ready for Doomsday. But it's like, but if you've got the creators going, well, actually, half of this is completely unrelated, it's not going to go anywhere, so let's just re-release the last film and put like a line where they say, yeah, oh, by the way, I'm going to shrink you down and take you back to 2012. Do you remember Victor Von Doom? He was a cool name. And it just kind of goes on into something else. So, yeah, I think...
I just remembered the example I was thinking of. So have you seen James Gunn's Superman film? His reboot of Superman?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So what that film I thought did really well is it didn't explain anything about the world. It didn't explain anything really about Superman's backstory, I think. They just launched the audience into the world as it was, where Superman is a superhero in a world full of superheroes, and they, those characters all interact, and they just didn't bog themselves down. I think Doctor Who could do a very similar thing. It doesn't have to explain anything. As long as they've got all the characters in place, they're all really interesting, there's a story arc mapped out, I think you can just launch straight back into it and not really... Because I think James Gunn, with that Superman film, proved that you can do that. You don't need origin stories for everything. You just need to tell a decent story and it's fine. Because audiences these days are really mature with fantasy and sci-fi and stuff. It's like...
Russell T Davies did that. He did that with the Daleks. He did it with the Cybermen. It was like... Here's not like a quick 10-second montage of old Doctors and episodes to go, oh, do you remember this? It was just like... Here's a character wrapped in chains with a plunger that can kill people. It's called a Dalek. It's shit scary. Everyone goes, oh my God. And it doesn't matter. The Doctor refers to it. And then if you've watched Who in the past, you're like, okay, it's a very subtle one line. That's all you need. You don't need to dumb it down to the point where, do you remember the Rani? Here's how it used to look. Oh my God, I remember now. Also, it's the Rani.
I hope you've enjoyed the Rani. She's now going to be eaten after like 10 minutes.
Complete waste of time. And even at the very start of the 60th as well, where like you have the Doctor just sort of stood on the edge of a planet floating in space going, I Had a Friend Called Donna Noble.
Oh my God.
She's what?
I forgot about that.
The very beginning, because I remember, I think we mentioned it on the podcast and we kind of watched it going, what the hell's this intro about?
Just a really bizarre moment in a very good episode. And that seems to be sort of quite prominent in those later episodes of Doctor Who. They would just make some bizarre swings and then the rest of it would be quite good. But
yeah,
because I remember us all thinking about that and about Mrs. Flood, who, by the way, Series 1 and Series 2 Mrs. Flood, they're basically just two different characters. It's clear that the whole
such a
Rani
waste
thing
of time.
is just... But yeah, but we started to theorise because it's more interesting than what actually happened, that David Tennant's Doctor talking to the camera, like the Rani breaking the fourth wall, talking to the camera all the time. There was something going on with time and it was weird, and there was like maybe like a God of Stories element, so people were monologuing to the camera. Just more interest, like just make sense of the stuff that people are watching. That's the because I don't know what else to say about that. I remember that being rubbish.
But I think a lot of that just hits the nail on the head, and I think we're just going to hit the dark days again. There might be extra bits of media because I've heard David Tennant and one of the characters from the Sarah Jane Adventures are doing an audiobook. They're kind of reuniting and doing like an original story
Big
there.
Finish stuff. Again, David Tennant's
Finish.
like all over Big Finish, so he never really goes away.
Yeah, so it's, I don't know. The problem is that if it was left in a fairly pleasant place, and by that I mean if we'd got a third series to kind of wrap up what Rusty... Because I reckon if it had the third series, it wouldn't have surprised me if Russell T Davies managed to tie it all up in a big bow and we'd all have gone, you beautiful bastard. And he'd gone, it was there all along. But I think it was just a series of behind the scenes cock-ups that led it down this path where it just became more bewildered and confusing, and you had the gaps between the shows. I mean, The War Between the Land and the Sea, Disney Plus have now effectively disowned it. That's not going to be released at all in the US. So they've completely washed their hands of that. It was just such a massive, confusing situation, and maybe just a lesson as well that you don't make British institutions commercialise and Americanise and stuff like that, because it loses a lot of its charm and its identity. And that most recent iteration of Who was exactly that. It became the show it wasn't, and it was never supposed to be.
I couldn't tell you a single thing that happened in The War Between the Land and the Sea. I'm joking. I thought it was okay. On that point, actually, Russell Tovey recently did an interview with the Radio Times where he says that he's expecting it to be released in the US. So this year, I think. This year. Or, fans across the pond still wait for an update. It's coming out on Disney Plus next year. Oh, so next year. So apparently he knows that it's coming out next year. So obviously that gap is extraordinary, but that is amazing that they're still... Why? Well, I don't know. But
so you're going to have a Doctor Who spin-off series where, and I might be completely wrong, but I've heard that the Doctor Who episodes have been pulled from Disney Plus in America. So you're going to have a spin-off show for a show that no longer exists, at least on the other side of the Atlantic. That is mad.
There's so much to get into, isn't there? I mean, it's just, I just don't even know where. I always come back to this. When Russell T Davies was announced as coming back to Doctor Who, it was almost like the best. I remember where I found out. Like, it's almost like the best moment of my life, because it really reached into that mistake. It was really like, this is for you. You know, this justifies your passion for Doctor Who. I was so excited. And it's just been a behind the scene. It's just gone as badly as you'd expect it to. You know, I just genuinely, I thought this could be the start of, because all the bluster and the pomp and the spin-offs and all of it, it was like, I just can't really, it just sort of existed. It was kind of fine. there were some good elements. It just sort of existed, and then it just went away.
But you had the Whoniverse. You remember, like, the very start of the 60th? Like, Whoniverse. Oh my God! Look, it's going to be like the Avengers of Doctor Who. We got one spin-off, and it got canned.
We need to deep dive on this. I can't. Don't know if I have the energy. Anyway, thank you for joining us for another episode of Who Doesn't Have a Podcast. I don't know when we'll do the next one. I think when we feel like there's anything to talk about, or, you know, if we want to have a bit of fun and rewatch an episode, or I don't know. I've sort of spent 5 to 10 minutes of this episode talking about Marvel and DC and Top Gear for a minute, and, you know.
I mean, at least we're just as bemused as people watching Doctor Who are.
I don't think
even the podcast.
Is anyone watching Doctor Who?
I wonder how many people, and this might be a bit of a dick thing to say, but I wonder how many people go, do you know what? I'm really in the mood. Should we watch the last 2 seasons of Who?
Yeah. Do you know, Jerome put it really well on our last podcast, where he went, when the Doctor regenerated into Billy Piper, did that really have any effect for the general audience? Like, did that make any waves? And I remember thinking, I don't think it did it?
I think he's only bitter because he got that BBC News alert that ruined it for him.
Yeah, remember that. Yeah, I remember on the last podcast we were saying the thing that surprised us most about it is we'd heard the rumour and the leak, and we all decided that it can't possibly be true, and then it actually happened.
We all explicitly said, "Nah, that's too stupid. They wouldn't do something like that." Oh my God, they did.
They did. They announced a Christmas special, and then it was cancelled. I can't. I don't want to be too down on it, because I do keep saying I did kind of enjoy quite a bit of it. I just think it's the whole behind the scenes thing that I'm really interested in. Anyway,
I'd love to have been a fly on the wall, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would. I'm going to wrap up again. Thanks again. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Who Doesn't Have a Podcast. We'll see you next time.
You will indeed. Follow us on the socials. Just send us a message. We're bored. Anything to do with Who, or, you know, who's your favourite Marvel superhero, or who would you bring back from the dead? Let's go with that one. Because anything's possible these days, apart from Doctor Who.